My friends, be welcome. It is an honor for you to join me today as I present to you my first full in-depth review of a mod. Today I figured that there was no better mod than one of the most ambitious I have ever experienced with Medieval Kingdoms 1212 AD for Total War Attila. I think it's safe to say that the fanbase has been clamoring for Medieval 3 for quite some time now. To put that into context, it's been over 16 years since Medieval 2 Total War was released. While there is still quite a bit of fun to be had with that game, it definitely is starting to show its age. This is where the mod steps in to help fill the gap. As you start the campaign, you'll notice that there will be two campaigns to start with, an early and a late campaign. Right now, only the early is available, which is still plenty of content to go through. Just looking at the faction selection screen, it is incredibly overwhelming on what to choose. I have a ton of appreciation for the work put in to have all these factions, but I wish it was easier to read. A good way would be to separate them out where they are located on the map, so something like Iberian factions, British Isles, the Balkans, etc, etc. We will be looking at the Kingdom of Castile as well as the Abbasid Caliphate. Playing as Castile, I was thrown into a battle right away facing Muslim forces alongside with fellow Christian factions. Right off the bat, I noticed the art used for the unit cards, which looked really good honestly. The artwork as well as the units themselves are very well designed. There are also a ton of unique units that we will get into later, including trebuchets and cannons. Unlike many other Total War mods, this is more than just a reskin of existing units. If I had one minor nitpick regarding the units is how brightly colored some of them are. It looks a bit too clean in my opinion, which clashes with the environments found in Attila. For the actual fighting itself, it feels like a natural evolution to what was presented in the vanilla experience. Heavy cavalry is king and very effective in delivering the killing blow. Ranged weaponry is completely revamped, and I'm not just referring to the guns that are present. Depending on the ammo type that is used will determine the overall range of the weapon. For example, an extended shot for longbows will grant additional range, while explosive shot for an onager will shorten it. And speaking of onagers, I wouldn't recommend using them in siege battles due to their short range. Instead, you want to get yourself some trebuchets as those have great range and are essential to taking down the walls. Each settlement is now fully walled, so siege equipment is more important than ever. I'm personally fine with this change, although I wish that we were taking down actual castles and not just the same fortifications from the vanilla experience. Hopefully this is something that is currently in the works. When it comes to the campaign map, the best way to play Attila is to take your time building up your provinces and wait for a good opportunity to strike. The same is still true here, although you'll be waiting around far longer than you'll expect early on. Once you see an opportunity and start to take over cities, you'll eventually be able to wipe out the rest of the faction pretty quickly. Most of the AI factions usually only field one or two armies, so destroying those basically prevents the AI from retaliating. Please note that I am playing on normal difficulty, so it is possible that the AI has far more armies in harder difficulties. When managing your cities, the first thing you'll notice is how each settlement is its own province. That means that each settlement will need to be as self-sustaining as possible. This definitely is a callback to how settlements were just that in Total Wars prior to Rome 2. Thankfully, there are buildings that can provide bonuses to adjacent settlements, but I would like to see these get a bit of a boost, especially for sanitation with how dirty most places start off as. I also wish that the AI would prioritize sanitation as well, but that may be way out of scope at this point. There's also an executable that can be run in order to increase building slots from 6 to 10, but I didn't mess with this one since it seems to be a hard-coded variable and I didn't want other things to end up being affected. It may be fine and actually pose no risks, but it was just a bit too scary for me. Recruiting also works differently here. Instead of just having the building in the settlement to recruit units to your heart's content, it is now based on the population of the settlement. Having the correct amount of a certain population class will allow you to recruit the unit as well as replenish your troops in between battles. If you've played similar mods like Ancient Empires for Attila or Divide et Impera for Rome 2, this works basically the same. As expected, religion still plays a huge role in the campaign. Spreading your religion is essential to keeping public order under control. One cool tweak is how you only need 10% of the religion in your settlements in order to convert to it. That means that as Castile, I could have said screw you to the Reconquista and just became a Muslim faction. I didn't do that in my campaign, but it could have been an interesting scenario to explore. Some factions can't change religions at all like the Teutonic Order. That makes sense, but then factions like the Abbasid Caliphate can change, which makes no sense since all their faction bonuses deal with the Sunni faith. The tech tree has seen a rework in order to accommodate the time period. One thing I noticed is how slow the tech is on the military side. I get this is done in order to prevent players from getting later medieval units far too early, but at this rate you'll most likely never see these units before you end your campaign. One strange change I've noticed is that this mod only has 2 seasons, summer and winter. That means that it only takes 2 turns per year, which is far too fast for a game like this. It's hard to get too attached to your young kings as they'll be in their 50s in just a handful of turns and will have very few chances to level up. The same also happens to agents as well. I wish I knew why this was the case, but there are some ways to address it. I'll talk about that a bit later in this review. What also interested me with this mod is the decision system. This is basically the same of how it is in the Crusader Kings series. Basically, you can perform a decision once certain criteria is met. Unfortunately, some of these decisions don't have much impact. Once I finally became the Kingdom of Spain, I figured something would happen. The name did change, but I didn't get any additional bonuses or a change in my faction emblem like Thrones of Britannia does. When playing as Castile, I noticed that there were no campaign victory conditions, which I am fine with since this seems to go more of the sandbox route similar to other Paradox titles than anything else. However, I did notice a couple of victory conditions for the Abbasid Caliphate, but no decisions for me to be made. I thought I would be able to call a jihad to push into the west, but I did get a crusade called on me fighting the Pope. It was fun for a bit fighting back armies, but most factions that joined the crusade never made it my way. And I guess I should mention a bit about the Pope. As a Catholic faction, you'll get missions to improve relations with the Pope. If you have high relations with the Pope, which is at least a 7 out of 10, you can request funds from him. This is a great way to gain some much needed money early on, but outside of that and a few scripted crusades, there's not much here. As of this video, naval ships are not available at this time. However, you can still engage in naval battles, although it will be with transport ships. There are bonuses that only affect naval ships, so it definitely appears to be on the way. When that'll get implemented, however, I am not too sure of. Naval battles in Medieval 2 can only be auto-resolved, so I'm very curious what this mod has in store. Thankfully, you can use all the units currently available for a custom battle. This is a great way to play as units from the high and late Middle Ages. This is where I experienced the cannons, which are definitely a blast to play with, if you know what I mean. It's one thing for a game to get mods, but it's another thing entirely for the mods to have mods of their own. Just to make it easy, we will call them sub-mods. There's so many of them addressing some of my issues like 4 seasons a year, faster research, and a ton more. I won't really be discussing them too much here though, as that's a whole nother box to tackle. The last thing I want to do is talk about all the references to Medieval 2, mainly in the game's soundtrack. Most, if not all of it, is taken from Medieval 2, which is always great music to hear. Even some sound effects when ending your turn and others are found throughout, which I do appreciate. Overall, I am very impressed with the work that has gone into this mod. There is a ton of content to explore with a ton of factions, as well as a huge roster to play with. Unfortunately, there's still a bunch more that needs to be done, but that should not take away from any of the amazing work already accomplished. I'm definitely looking forward to everything being fleshed out, as well as the later start date. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I really would appreciate any feedback since this is my first mod review, and as always, this is Powerhouse, signing off.